Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, August the 2nd, 2024. As usual, I'll be talking about what is going to be happening today from the perspective of astrology, looking at what are the big events astrologically which I think might have an impact. And of course, looking at the 12 signs, how each of the 12 signs is going to be affected by astrological events, and also looking at things from the perspective of the I Ching. Now, there are some events which I think could be quite important that we do need to be focusing on. The fact that we do have a square between Venus and Uranus. This square between Venus and Uranus could have an impact, for example, on Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And so I'll be looking at their charts, also looking at the chart of J.D. Vance. This Venus square Uranus is, remember we've got Venus is around 26 Leo, Uranus is around 26 Taurus, so Uranus is conjunct Algol. So that is something to be looked at. Also, we have true Black Moon Lilith moving into Libra. So true Black Moon Lilith will be on the Aries point, opposition the Aries point, and will be therefore opposition Neptune. So that's something I want to look at. And we've got an anniversary today. We've got the anniversary of the death of Warren Harding. So Warren Harding was president between, I think he got elected in 1920, took office in 1921, and he died in 1923. And Warren Harding, he has a bad reputation. His reputation was kind of permanently marred by something called the Teapot Dome scandal, where some land was leased to oil companies at a very cheap rate, and money changed hands, or at least there were interest-free loans were given, and it was the first cabinet in which one of the cabinet members went to prison. So yeah, he does have a bad reputation. So, perhaps if you want to criticize a president, you can say, well, he's the best president since Warren Harding. Was Trump the best president since Warren Harding? Was Joe Biden the best president since Warren Harding? So that's what I want to look at, Warren Harding. I've already looked at Warren Harding, but I want to look at Warren Harding's death in more detail. And we can't forget the Paris Olympics, because I believe that France today has its, let's get this right, France has its Mars return. And Mars return, that's, when Mars, at the time of the storming of the Bastille, returns to where it was. So could be a sensitive time for France. But before I look at all that, I want to really focus on today. Now, just a reminder that if you happen to like this video, I would be really, really grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate if you were to subscribe. I find it quite difficult to work out with YouTube metrics, but as far as I can gather, half the people who watch this video aren't subscribed or something like that. So if you're not subscribed and you do like the video, I would be very grateful if you were to just click the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really does help the channel. Okay, so let's look at what's happening today. So let's see. So there we have top right, we have Emmanuel Macron, we have Warren Harding, and we have Joe Biden, of course, and that is a picture I put up quite recently. That is a picture of Lilith, or an idea about what Lilith might look like. And so turning to what really is going on today, you can see that the moon continues to be in Cancer. So it doesn't matter where you are, the moon is very much in this sign. Moon in Cancer, by and large, works pretty well. After all, the moon rules Cancer. So when the moon moves through Cancer, things are quite good. Things are sort of emotionally comfortable, and we just have a good sense of what is right, from an emotional perspective. So if we are an emotional person, if we value our emotions, then the moon in Cancer can be something quite useful. And the moon makes a trine to Saturn. So there you can see Saturn in Pisces. And it's a very nice trine, that aspect. It allows us to perhaps control our emotions, but not in a way that is repressive. Perhaps we can even harness our emotions. We have strong feelings, and we perhaps want to use these feelings and to tune into these feelings. So that, I think, is really a very helpful aspect, moon trine Saturn. At the same time, we have got Venus square Uranus. So there is Venus, 27-1 Leo at noon in New York for today, August the 2nd, 2024. And it is square Uranus at around 27 degrees of the sign. So that Venus square Uranus is arguably presenting a different message from moon in Cancer. Venus-Uranus can be a little bit disruptive and headstrong. Venus wants to do things its way. Venus can be perhaps about artistic taste. That's one way of looking at Venus. So some people with Venus square Uranus might have particular ideas about what looks good, and ideas about style and how to dress and how to make an impact. And that's very interesting. But Venus square Uranus, it can be a little bit clumsy. We might think something looks good, but what do other people think? Okay, it's fine if we're deliberately trying to create an impact, fair enough. If you're trying to get people to sort of sit up and listen, then now might be very much the time to do it. But if we're looking for something more harmonious, we perhaps need to be aware of how our judgment about what looks good might actually be disruptive. Venus, at the same time, can be the planet of money. So Venus square Uranus, we probably have to tread a little bit carefully with money. Just don't suddenly splash out on something. Don't splash out on something because it looks good. So I suppose if you're shopping for clothes or some other item relating to beauty, you might see that something looks really appealing, and then you buy it, and you just realize that it doesn't look quite as good as you thought it did. Okay, you might think it looks good, but maybe other people won't. So it might also be a bad idea for example, buying people expensive and beautiful presents. Expensive and beautiful, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so Venus square Uranus can be a bit idiosyncratic. Venus square Uranus, relationships. Venus is a planet of love, after all. So close relationships may move in lots of different directions, and there may be unexpected events, and just don't be surprised about the impact you're having on another person, or perhaps the impact they're having on you. And don't make assumptions about the way relationships are going to work, because things might just take an unexpected turn. And at the same time as this, Venus is making a quintile aspect to Jupiter. So Venus and Jupiter are 72 degrees apart. So with Venus and Jupiter being 72 degrees apart, that may say something about the kind of style that we're adopting. Venus quintiles, it's a 1/5 of a circle, are a very man-made aspect. or woman-made aspect. There's a certain artificial element to a quintile. So with Venus quintile Jupiter, we may be trying, for example, very hard to be optimistic. We may feel that we have to put a really good face on it. And it just might seem a little bit contrived if we don't do it properly. But still, the challenge might be to consider a situation we're in that may not be 100% perfect and actually work out how we can really improve it, how we can be optimistic, but in a way that doesn't come over as being fake. And so with the right approach, it may be possible to turn a situation round, to make people happy, to make people be positive about the future. So I think that aspect, Venus quintile Jupiter, could be hard work, but I do think that there is a way to manage it. And finally, Black Moon Lilith. Well, you've got true Black Moon Lilith and you've got mean Black Moon Lilith, and there's some argument about which one should use, which one should use. Remember, the Black Moon Lilith represents the point at which the moon is furthest away from the Earth. So it's apogee. I think the problem with a mean Black Moon Lilith is that it's something which is essentially smoothed. It's you've taken an average, and so taking an average might be fine if you're looking at things from the perspective of signs, but usually, although mean Black Moon Lilith and true Black Moon Lilith can be in different signs. But there is perhaps an issue about when you're looking at an exact aspect with mean Black Moon Lilith, because you're basically looking at an approximation. And if you're using an aspect, how can you take something that is approximate and try to create an aspect out of it? Anyway, if we take the true Black Moon Lilith, it goes into Libra today. And so that means that there is a point today when true Black Moon Lilith is exactly opposition Neptune. And this opposition could be tricky, assuming true Black Moon Lilith really works. There could be some quite dark feelings. Maybe it's not our dark feelings, it's other people's dark feelings, and dark feelings in society. And perhaps there are these dark entities lurking in the collective unconscious, perhaps. And these dark entities with true Black Moon Lilith opposite Neptune may be stronger than usual. They're making their impact felt in terms of the collective and the collective unconscious, and then that's kind of affecting how people are just sort of behaving out there. But I suppose there has to be a positive side to it, doesn't it? You could say that it's a time when we can be very creative and artistic, and this art is going to perhaps reflect the dark side of human nature. So if you want to create something artistic, then do perhaps consider the possibility that you may be able to tune into the dark side of human nature, and that could allow you actually to be very creative and to come up with something that's very significant in terms of describing what is happening to the Earth and what actually motivates people. Because I suppose people are actually motivated by something that is pretty dark and might be symbolized by Black Moon Lilith. Turning to the heliocentric picture, so here we go. That's the positions of the planets heliocentrically, and I'm not saying that a great deal is going on. Mercury is making a quincunx aspect to Jupiter. So Mercury quincunx Jupiter, it's like we're trying to say something, and we're trying to get the balance right. When we say something, we want to make sure that we don't cause upset. That's perhaps quite important to us, but it can be difficult to get the words out, and perhaps we will just exaggerate, and exaggeration can cause problems. We'll just take something too far in terms of how we're expressing ourselves verbally. So I think that might be a possible concern there. And at the same time, Venus is opposition the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. You see, you can see this. There's Saturn and Neptune. So Venus has made its opposition to Saturn, and now it's starting to make an opposition to Neptune. But so Venus is approximately opposition that midpoint from a heliocentric view. So that can represent concerns and fears regarding relationships, perhaps, and we're just going to be concerned perhaps about whether or not we can trust someone. And I suppose there's scope for being let down with Venus opposition Saturn Neptune. And at the same time as that, we've got Mars on the verge of moving into Taurus, again from a heliocentric point of view. And I don't think we should worry too much about signs in a heliocentric chart, but with Mars moving into Taurus, Mars is making a square to Pluto. We had this yesterday, the beginning of this Mars square Pluto heliocentrically. So with Mars making the square to Pluto, I think it can be about power struggles, people really being quite frantic to express themselves, to get their way, and it just might feel that there are winners and losers, that if you don't get your way, then someone else gets their way. And so that does create the possibility of some kind of power struggle. But overall, I'm not saying that the heliocentric picture is particularly major, but there just are a couple of aspects that I think we should certainly be taking note of. Now I'm going to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. And so these are my forecasts for today, which is Friday, August the 2nd, 2024. Aries. Aries, I'm not convinced that there's a great deal that you need to do. I mean, there may be things that you want to do, but I'm unconvinced that there's going to be any particular obligation. You might feel, Aries, that it's best to do what you feel comfortable with. So if you've been doing something recently that feels right, it doesn't put any stress on you, and it's something you can do well, then probably you should just carry on doing it and just not worry too much about outside opportunities. You might feel perhaps that there's something you're missing, but it is Friday, it's the weekend coming up, so is there really anything that actually needs to be done? Yet, if there is any drama, it may actually be connected with other people and the outside world, because we do have a square aspect between Venus and Uranus. So what you might find is that some people are behaving in a somewhat erratic way. I mean, very often it's Aries creating the surprises, but it might at the moment be other people. Other people's behaviour may be of some concern to you, and if you look at what people are doing, you may come to the conclusion that they don't actually know what they're doing, and you shouldn't expect anyone to behave in a particular way, because that's Venus square Uranus, and certain people may actually be really headstrong. They want to do things their way. They want to be independent-minded, and they're not prepared to listen to reason. And from an Aries perspective, you are quite open with your opinions. I mean, that's just generally Aries. And you like to make comments. So you might want to comment in terms of what someone is doing, what someone looks like, what someone is creating. And your comment is going to be open and honest. But it might not be treated like that. It might be treated as being perhaps a little underhand, that you're trying to be deliberately critical, that you're trying to tear someone down. And so actually, some people could actually be quite touchy. So if you think that someone is, looks, you look at them and they look a bit strange, or they're doing something a bit strange, or perhaps you shouldn't say anything, or perhaps you should resort to pleasantries. I mean, you know how it is, isn't it? It's like on Facebook, isn't it? When people say they're going to do something, they announce they're going to have a tattoo, or they, for example, or they just had a tattoo, and everyone says, "Oh, it's wonderful. You look great. You look great. It's fine. It's beautiful. That's the best tattoo I've ever seen." And you don't see anyone saying, "Oh, well, that tattoo looks absolutely ghastly. That's going to cost a lot of money to get rid of. You're going to have to see a dermatologist on that. That's going to cost thousands of dollars. Plus, I see a misspelling there." That's not what you're supposed to say, is it? And as an Aries, you may feel that there's something you need to say about someone's appearance or what they've done to themselves. Maybe you should hold fire, because criticism and comment may not be taken kindly. Of course, if someone is about to do something drastic to themselves, then sure, you can perhaps try to stop them, but even then you might get some criticism. So if you are going to enter discussions about what things look like and items relating to beauty and taste and aesthetics, be careful. Because some people might be very stubborn in terms of what they look like and their choices about fashion, for example. And we also have today an opposition between Neptune and true black moon Lilith. And I think you might pick up on this. I think that Aries, you're going to be aware that something is not quite right. I think that you can pick up on something which is unspoken, which is perhaps wrong. And it just seems clear to you when you're engaging with society, with your community, maybe particular individuals. You just see that something's not right. And the question is, how do you deal with it? And it is quite complicated. Is it something you need to say something about? Or is it something that just has to be kept quiet about? I think that fundamentally, Aries, you know what is right. Aries do. They just have a great sense of right and wrong. And you just have this inkling that someone is doing something bad, and you perhaps have to work out how best to address the thing. Obviously you have a responsibility to call people out if they're doing something wrong. But at the same time, you can't just call them out in whatever way you feel is appropriate, because then you're just going to cause offence, especially now when you've got Venus square Uranus. Not you who've got Venus square Uranus, we have Venus square Uranus. We've all got Venus square Uranus. So tread carefully, and perhaps you have to make some kind of moral decision, and you have to decide how best to confront something that is wrong. I don't like to use the word evil, but just something that isn't right. And it's not about you. I'm not trying to make you paranoid or anything. You're fine. It just relates to what other people are doing and what's perhaps going on in society. Taurus. You, at the moment, Taurus, do appear to be quite stubborn. You want to do things your way, and right now it doesn't look as if you really want to be told. And it's always good when you're independent minded, but at the same time, sometimes it is necessary to consider what other people are saying, even if they're wrong. So try not to be too sensitive if people make comments about you and your plans and your ideas. It's okay. It doesn't matter. You're not being attacked. Okay, you might be being attacked, but I think in most cases you're not. And so try to be a bit more sort of relaxed when dealing with comment. I mean, comment is okay. And at the same time, when you decide on a course of action, Taurus, it's very difficult to stop, isn't it? You make up your mind. There's something you're going to do. You want to do it, and the decisions are over. You're set on a course, and you're just going to follow this course, and that's it. And I think, Taurus, you just need to be a little careful here. I think you're, in some respects, not being entirely reasonable. You perhaps need to just ask a few questions and perhaps put yourself in a situation where you can get constructive criticism. There's absolutely no harm in getting constructive criticism, because constructive criticism can lead to just small amendments in your plans, and you make that amendment, and then things are a whole lot better. So, Taurus, try to be flexible, but obviously not too flexible. It's good that you're very determined, and it's good that you have a great sense of your individuality. That is really good. But Taurus, I just do think that it can be taken too far, and I would suggest that you be very careful if you have got plans relating to decoration. If you're trying to, for example, beautify your own home, or you've decided to paint a room a particular colour, or, I don't know, doing something more substantial, before you absolutely agree to anything, before you buy the paint, just wait a bit, I would say. Because right now, Venus square Uranus is a time when you are quite stubborn, hasty, very sure of your opinions, very sure of your aesthetic judgment. But it just may be that you're rushing into things. And in fact, if you've got any decision, particularly a decision that relates to aesthetics and beauty, then maybe you should just wait a couple of days. And what you should be waiting for is Venus moving into Virgo. So Venus moves into Virgo on Monday, Sunday, Monday. For most of us, it'll be Monday. So when Venus moves into Virgo, your ability to be self-critical will be much improved. And so perhaps you should hold off on making decisions relating to beauty, decoration, aesthetics, until Monday. So or indeed you should probably hold off on making decisions about anything to do with beauty, clothing, what you wear, for example, buying stuff, whatever else you might be planning on doing relating to aesthetics, particularly if you're taking a decision that costs money, that perhaps can't be reversed or takes a long time to reverse, then perhaps you should hold off until next week, because when Venus goes into Virgo, you're going to be much more self-critical, and self-critical in a good way, and you're going to be able to look at what your plans are, and then you'll have a better understanding about whether it is actually the right thing to do. Now, in terms of other people and your social life, I think it actually can be quite a nice day. You'll find that if you can just get over the extremes of your own stubbornness, then there can be something about you that is comfortable, that you can put people at their ease, and I think that people will be prepared to trust you, and the things you say will come over nicely. I don't think you've got a huge amount to say at the moment, but the things you do have to say will be said, I think, quite nicely, and your delivery of your words is going to be quite effective, and I think it's also going to be quite reassuring. Gemini, you are in a state of mind where you're trying to work out what matters and what is important. And you are very aware at the moment that you have limited resources. Now, I'm not saying that you do have limited resources. I'm just saying that right now you might feel that you've got limited resources. And so you might, for example, look at how much money you've got in the bank or not got in the bank and saying, well, you've got so much money, but it's got limitations. And I think you're going to be aware that many of the things you do today have a financial consequence. And I think that if in doubt, don't spend it. There's no real need to spend money unless it's planned for. So sure, there's always money that has to be spent, but when you've got money that, there's this question, does it have to be spent? Is it necessary to spend this money? And I think that you'll be very good at structuring your expenditure, looking at what you spend money on and just asking yourself whether it's really worth the effort. Sorry, not worth the effort. Whether it's really worth it. Does it really need to be spent? So, in terms of money, it's just stick to it. Stick to a plan. Stick to, if you like, a shopping list. There is a shopping list, isn't there? Things that have to be spent on a particular day. If there's a piece of expenditure that is not planned, that you hadn't expected to make, then probably you shouldn't make that expenditure. Stick to what's in the budget, and I think you'll be very good, not just in terms of your own money, but also in terms of considering other people's money, or if you've got a job, perhaps the money and resources of your employer or your business. You'll just have a very good understanding of the way it should all be sorted out. And so I think that is certainly very good. And you are actually, Gemini, you're quite sensible today. But in terms of relationships, you're not entirely satisfied with the way things are going. And I don't mean this in a sort of a major sense, but I think you probably feel that you could get more from other people, that they're perhaps holding back something. And it's not a time to complain, but it just seems that you're in a place where you're able to be manipulative, perhaps, and manipulative in the sense of controlling the social agenda and giving the impression that you're someone that is important and is worth knowing. Gemini, a good person worth getting to know. Well, it goes further than that, doesn't it? You're able to exercise a certain amount of power, and it's a power that can bring people together. It's almost like a kind of magnetism. Perhaps it's an electromagnet. So you are perhaps more magnetic than you give yourself credit for, but it's a magnet. It's a magnetism that does have to be switched on. Hence the electromagnet. As I don't know. I don't really know much about physics, but an electromagnet is presumably a magnet you have to switch on and off. Is that right? I don't know. But it's a magnetism that you have some control over. So if you want to be magnetic and you want to bring about changes in your social environment, then that is something you very much can do, and you can attract new people into your sphere of influence. And it's just something about the way you are, and also you seem to be a relatively reassuring person. So that is something, Gemini, that you need to consider, and I think that you need to tune into. Of course, you don't have to, I suppose. If you are a complete introvert and you don't care about people, then that's fine. But perhaps that would be a shame, because you really can have an influence in pretty much all settings, whether it's in your social life, your personal life, and if appropriate in your working life. You are someone who is taken seriously, and it does also seem that you're sensible, that you can be trusted. You're not going to do anything stupid, and so do take advantage of that if you possibly can. Now, there are a number of ways in which you can make your presence felt, and although I think that you are quite a reassuring person, there just may be moments when you feel you have to make a special effort to get people's attention, and it may be that appearance and communication may be very connected to each other. So it's not just the words that you come up with, it's how those words are framed. I mean, something trivial. So if you're writing an email, I mean, do people use emails anymore? So if you happen to be writing an email, the font might matter. Just choosing the right font might make all the difference. If you are, I don't know, sending a text message, all those sort of emoticons and all those kind of stuff, which I don't really understand. Apparently they will make a big difference today. And if you are communicating with someone face to face, then the way you say your words, the way you present your words, and indeed, things like what you are wearing when you say something does matter. So if it just so happens today, Gemini, that you have to say something important, if it's really important, maybe choosing your wardrobe could actually be important, because presentation does matter. the way the words are wrapped, whether those words be the spoken word or the written word, it is going to be very important today, I think. Cancer. Right now, Cancer, you have a great sense of self. You know who you are, you know what you want, and there's nothing that you have to apologize for, there's nothing you have to explain, and in general, Cancer, you are fine just as you are. There's just absolutely no changes to make. Okay, I don't want to encourage complacency, but you seem to have got the balance right, and you're able to present yourself in a way that is effective, but also which has the right level of control. You know, you are a little bit controlling today. I mean, not super controlling, but you understand that a bit of structure, you know, really is quite important. Not too much structure, but just enough structure to just make your presence felt, to give yourself gravitas, and that is really going to be very much appreciated. Though when I say that you've got things right, but you don't have to, you don't have to make any effort, I don't want to encourage you to be complacent, because for all of us in any particular day, things could always be better. I suppose for you right now, it may be that there may be just a couple of areas where you could perhaps be better informed, or you've perhaps got a particular way of doing something and it could be done in a better way. And some Cancerians can be quite traditional. They have a way of doing things and they don't really like to experiment. But today perhaps a bit of experimentation might be useful. Getting ideas which are perhaps very different from your own ideas. We're not talking really about challenging ideas, but we're talking about ideas that just are different, and just a bit of experimentation might be a good idea without actually making huge changes to yourself and your approach. So some experimentation is fine, but just don't feel pressurized or don't feel pushed, because essentially you've got it all right. It's all clear. Now, as far as money is concerned, money is often important to Cancerians. They really do have a good understanding of what things cost and what the state of their resources is. I mean, okay, most Cancerians, I suppose a few Cancerians I can think of are completely irresponsible with money, but most Cancerians have good financial grounding. And I think that Cancer, you can perhaps feel that something is not entirely right. You may just feel that there is a bit of a threat out there to your financial well-being. It's like Cancerians are just so sensitive. They're very much aware of what could threaten their security, and you can see the threat, you can feel the threat, you can see something like out of the corner of your eye that if it went wrong, it could cause serious damage to your financial security. At least that's how you might perceive it. So it may be a situation, Cancer, where you can make a few changes. You can perhaps take action to make yourself safer. And it's possible that you start to realize that a couple of people are perhaps financially dangerous, or a couple of situations are financially dangerous. And these people, these situations, it's a voluntary connection. So you don't have to be involved with these dangerous situations. And so it's up to you. So it may be a time where you take the decision that you need to cut yourself off from something because you're just simply concerned about the risk. It just feels that it's just not worth it. So Cancer, you may be in a state where you just decide that's it. This is too dangerous. This is not something you want to be involved with, and you need to look after your own and perhaps your family's security, and that security is going to be especially of a financial nature. Now, I'm not suggesting that all relationships are problematic, and far from it. At the moment, relationships can work very well, particularly the relationships that are fundamental to you. Perhaps the relationships you're already involved in. So whatever that relationship is, if it's a relationship based on trust, or it's a relationship that's been going on for some time, then I think that relationship can be enhanced today. And I think that if you trust someone and you know that you can trust someone, then that person can be even more of a plus in your life, and you can benefit from their presence, and you can benefit from their wisdom. And so do listen to what the important people in your life have to say, and because they've got some useful advice, and it's not just about advice and listening, it's just about being supported by someone. And I think that today is the day when actually, Cancer, you can feel very supported, but not in a way that is restrictive. It's just going to be very natural, just naturally feeling supported by the people who matter. Now, as far as new relationships are concerned, I mean, one always has to be careful talking about new relationships because, in the average life, how many major things happen? Probably about 6 or 7 in the average life. But new relationships for most people are really few and far between, particularly new and important relationships. But it may be a time where you can get closer to someone, where you perhaps start to appreciate someone in a way you just hadn't appreciated them before. And it's not just appreciating their wisdom or their knowledge or their maturity. It's perhaps also appreciating their perspective and just being aware that someone who has a different perspective from you could be a plus in your life. And it's because you realize that someone else's perspective, even if it's very different from your own, could be life-enhancing and could make your life richer and more meaningful on many different levels. I'm not necessarily talking about anything romantic. It may be that you can have a connection with someone, an enriching connection with someone, but perhaps only lasts a couple of days. Relationships have their life cycles. Some relationships last for decades, others they last for a day or two, or even an hour or two. So look for people who you can benefit from. It can be as trivial as walking down the street, having a conversation with someone. They say something useful that makes you think, and you never see that person again. But still, you had a useful relationship with that person, even if that relationship only lasted a couple of minutes. Leo, you have, in some respects, quite an optimistic view of the world at the moment. You sort of have a sense of the possibilities of people coming together and helping each other, and you're very aware of issues about unity and community, and you just know, Leo, that you are not alone, and that does give you a sense, I suppose it gives you a sense of hope, and perhaps a greater sense of hope than maybe other people have. You know, why can't people who have a common interest come together? And Leo, I think that you're going to be relatively good at bringing people together, and it's because you have a certain vision, and I think it's a vision that people are going to really appreciate, a vision of unity, of people having a common purpose. So if you have an opportunity to bring people together today, then Leo, I think that it's very important that you take advantage of that. At the same time, though, Leo, you could have quite a dramatic impact on the world around you. And you have to remember that Venus is still moving through Leo. It's coming to the end of Leo, but as it moves through late Leo, it makes a square aspect to Uranus. So that square between Venus and Uranus is certainly interesting. And I think on one hand, it does make you an exciting and compelling person. People just can't ignore you. And you're able to present yourself in such a way that almost makes people curious. They want to know more about you. And I suppose there are things you can do to attract even more attention. And I suppose the things you wear could be important with Venus square Uranus. Venus is about what you wear, can be, particularly Venus in Leo. So I suppose today, think carefully about your clothes, because they are going to have an impact in terms of the impression you have on the outside world. So do think about that very hard. But it is possible, Leo, that you could be disruptive. So that kind of contradicts what I said. I said on one hand that when I began this piece, Leo, I said that you have the capacity for bringing people together, and that is certainly true. But if you're too headstrong, if you're too inflexible, you also have the capacity for breaking things apart. And perhaps that's because your approach may be just too strident. You're just too fixed on your impression, the impression you are making. And the impression you are making is so strong, so powerful, that it may actually put people off. So you just need to get the balance right. You need to make the effort to make an impression. But if you make too much of an effort to make an impression, if you try too hard to have an impact, then you may create the opposite impression. And rather than attract people, the people might run away. So, Leo, just get the balance right. I don't think it need be too difficult, but I think that is something that you really should be striving to achieve, getting the balance right. And part of a way you get the balance right is you use your feelings. The moon is in Cancer. The moon, sure, the moon goes into Leo tomorrow, but it is in Cancer at the moment. And so with moon in Cancer, that does give you a certain ability to reflect, not just rush into things. And if you give yourself the time, I think that you're actually going to be able to pick up on people's feelings and get some understanding of what their sensibilities are and how far they are prepared to be pushed. I mean, people are prepared to compromise a little, they're prepared to be pushed a little, but if you take things too far, then you're going to wreck things. But I do think with the moon in Cancer that you're able to listen to your feelings, and you can use your feelings as a way to just understand how far you can go and also get a sense of where the boundaries lie. And maybe that is an important part of what's going on, knowing where the boundaries are, knowing where your boundaries are, but also knowing where other people's boundaries are. And perhaps you need to know when to stop, and you can take things too far. But if you just take things to the limit, but not beyond the limit, then I suppose, Leo, that is a way to make a sort of maximum impact. And this goes back to what I was saying with Venus square Uranus. Venus is in Leo, Uranus is in Taurus. Leo and Taurus are very important signs, at least they are for you. And you can certainly make an impression. And I suppose if you're working today, then you may just have a strong sense that perhaps something needs to be said, that you do have to make an impression, at least in one area. It's not a day when you're really going to want to be completely ignored, and you're probably going to feel that you've just got an important contribution to make. And that contribution, it could shake things up a little, but your heart is in the right place. And so I'm hoping that if you're working and that your co-workers and your employers will understand that you've got an important contribution to make, and you might have something to say which could be a little bit disruptive, but very useful. And so you have to work out how you're going to be disruptive. How are you going to explain that you understand things and maybe they don't understand things as well as you? So that does require some thought. But in terms of money, I just think that you have a good sense of right and wrong, of how resources should be properly allocated. And if resources are not being properly allocated, I think perhaps you need to say something, but you need to say something in such a way that is palatable. Because if you're too into yourself, you're too focused on you, then you're not going to make much progress. But I don't think that's a problem, Leo. I think that today you will get the balance right, and you're going to have a powerful and beneficial impact. Virgo. It's a day, Virgo, when you can actually be quite influential. I think that people will take note of you. You know, they'll notice what you're doing, and I think that they will be interested in what you're doing, And I also think that they're going to kind of like having you around. There's something about you, Virgo, which is somewhat reassuring. There's something comfortable about Virgo. You're not someone that's going to cause problems, and you're someone who, at the moment at least, is quite sensitive and is giving good feedback, and is also trustworthy and reliable. So, do take advantage of this. Do realize that you are very much appreciated. And so if you can spend some time, parts of the day, socializing, whether it's face to face or over the phone, then I think you will be quietly quite successful, and you can help people be at ease with themselves and be at ease with the environment in which they're in. So if you're confronted by people, or you're with people who are perhaps new to a situation, they don't really know the rules, they don't know the ropes, you are the perfect person to make people feel that they are at home. And so that Virgo is quite a useful ability that you have at the moment. And to an extent, Virgo, you're able to have quite a transformative influence. So if there's anything wrong with the people around you, if the people around you seem to be going in different directions, they seem confused, then almost through an effort of will, you can get people to be cooperative, and you can get people to come together, and you can give people a sense of belonging. And I think that is really important, and giving people a sense of belonging isn't actually that difficult. It's just perhaps about getting them to just feel comfortable, and perhaps explaining a few things. Explanation is an important thing at the moment. Remember, Mercury is moving through Virgo, which is your sign, and so with Mercury moving through Virgo, you're able to tell people things. You're able to explain things in a very logical, rational way, and I would have thought that many Virgos at the moment are just good teachers. So if there's something you need to explain, then you'll be able to sort of get the basics all sorted out, and you'll be able to tell people how things are, and they'll listen, and they'll understand, and they'll appreciate it. And okay, you might have to go on for longer than expected. So if someone asks you a question, maybe you want to take, I don't know, half an hour giving them an answer. But I think that's okay. Giving intelligent, detailed answers to questions is something that Virgos can do at the moment. And that goes back to making people feel comfortable. Very often people feel comfortable because they don't understand things, because they've got questions. But you're the kind of person, Virgo, at the moment, who is actually able to answer questions. And so I think that people are really going to appreciate it. And when people know the answer to things, they feel more comfortable, and they feel, in many ways, more part of some kind of community, whatever that community is. So Virgo, I think that very much at the moment you are a force for good, and your sensitivity is going to be really important. And I also, Virgo, if you feel that something or someone has recently been holding you back, has just been preventing you from doing what you wanted to do, then now might be a good time to start to address the issue. There may be someone you need to talk to. You may be someone you need to, I won't say confront, because it's not a day for confrontation, but it's just when you talk to someone, but particularly someone who in the past has been a bit of a problem for you, or at least you've thought they've created a problem for you, if you talk to them, then a lot of mysteries may be explained, and they'll understand you, you'll understand them, and just the overall situation is going to become a lot easier. Now, just a reminder before I finish that Mercury is now very, very slow. It's slowing down. And on Monday, I think Monday, Mercury goes retrograde. Is that right? I'm pretty sure Mercury goes retrograde on Monday. Yep, it goes retrograde at 5:56 in the morning London time. So if you're in New York, that's shortly after midnight on Monday. So perhaps with Mercury about to go retrograde, Virgo, over the next couple of days into the weekend, there may just be a few things that need to be sorted out. You know, remember the weekend we've got the moon moving into Leo over the weekend, and so with the moon moving into Leo, things could be slowing down a little. So it may be more difficult to get in touch with people over the weekend, to sort things out over the weekend. So maybe, in fact, that means that if something needs to be resolved and agreed on, maybe today's the day to do it. So there might actually be a little bit of a hurry there. But maybe with Mercury going retrograde, about to go retrograde, just over the next few weeks, you know, if things haven't been sorted out right now, maybe you shouldn't be in too much hurry over the next few weeks, and maybe you should sort of bide your time until the end of the month. But I'll be talking about that in other videos. Libra, it's important that you're quite disciplined and focused today. You know, Libra, that there really are things that need to be done. And, you know, it's quite possibly the case that if you kind of don't do them today, it may be quite difficult to do them, you know, this weekend or Monday. You might just feel that there might be a sense in which you've missed your chance. So if there's something that needs to be done, then, you know, right now that might be a good idea to really try to get it out of the way. It might seem to be a pain, but you now have the opportunity, and it's not just that doing this might sound a bit boring. Yeah, there are things to be done which might seem tedious, but I think you'll be quite effective. You know, things will flow once you start to get involved with something. One thing will lead to another. You'll get into the swing of things, and Libra, I do think that you'll be able to cover a lot of ground pretty quickly. So don't procrastinate. In fact, don't procrastinate at all. Just get on with it. And this does actually apply also to your creative self-expression. You know, we always talk about creativity. And perhaps one talks a bit too much about creativity, and you know what one can do, what your special talents are. And you certainly have special talents. Of course, we all have special talents. But if you want to make the most of these special talents, you know, that could require a little bit of effort. You know, you have got to focus on yourself, make sure that everything really is in order, and just be prepared, perhaps, Libra, to take something of a detour. You know, you might feel you wanted to move ahead with something, but perhaps you just got to stop what you're doing and just make sure everything is sorted out, everything is in order, that you haven't missed any important details. And that way you'll be able to really make the most of what you've got. And a good reason why you need to do all this is because there is a square between Venus and Uranus today, and this Venus square Uranus could really affect you. And so Venus is your ruler, it's square Uranus. Uranus can be quite disruptive. And if you're not careful, you could just get caught by this Venus square Uranus, just responding to one disruption after another, just feeling that you have to respond, you just have to move this way, you have to move that way, you have to just respond, and then there may be times when you resent that, and you yourself might start doing things which create difficulties. Perhaps you're just going to be unreasonably stubborn, or you feel you have to be unreasonably stubborn, and so things could get out of control, and you might end up not achieving very much. And this takes me back to what I was saying at the beginning. It's going to be very important, Libra, that you just have a sense of what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be preparing, that you plan on having a fairly structured day, because if you have that structure, you'll be able to deal with outside interferences, and you will know that in the end you'll be able to reach the end of the day and have accomplished everything on your to-do list. Now, that's square between Venus and Uranus. It's something that does need to be discussed. It is the most important aspect today, and that Venus-Uranus square could make you quite willful. You're going to be very clear about what you want, how you're going to do it, and you're not really going to want to do things other people's way. And I suppose that's okay, especially when it comes to the important things. There are important things which are essential to you, and they can't be watered down. Though maybe you have to work out what's important and what is not important. There may be certain minor things which it doesn't really matter if you give ground on them. So you have to decide how controlled you actually need to be, and you don't want to be stubborn, just for the sake of it, because I think that would be a bit of a shame. Now, another thing about Venus is that Venus is in late Leo, so it's actually moving on to the fixed star Regulus, and Regulus is the royal star. It's very much connected with success and advancement, and maybe you can pick up on some of that Regulus energy, not just today, but over the next few days. Perhaps until Monday, Tuesday. So over the next few days, with Venus on Regulus, it does seem that you're going to be able to make an impression if you want to, and it may be a time when you could just get noticed, and people might regard you as being important and someone that they really do need to interact with. And finally, I should point out that Black Moon Lilith is moving into Libra today, and Black Moon Lilith moving into Libra It's going to be opposition Neptune. And so with Black Moon Lilith on conjunct Libra, that might just give you a different view. Some Librans, they do like to work on the surface because it's easier that way. You don't want to get involved in complicated matters. That's not what life is about. Keep it simple, at least in a social sense, and only go under the surface if it's really, really necessary. And with Black Moon Lilith moving into Libra, I'm not saying that it is going to impact you directly, but it's more about you starting to see that the world is a little bit complicated, that certain people are complicated, that there are two sides to everything. People on the surface may be nice and friendly and warm, but there's another side to them. There is that side which they don't reveal, which perhaps isn't always quite so pleasant. And it's that side that many Librans don't want anything to do with. But maybe, Libra, you should start to consider it, and also consider it in yourself. You are not an entirely nice person. None of us are nice people, really, at least deep down. We're all nice up to a point, but we all have sides to our personality which, we really don't really want to reveal, do we? But you're aware of that, those sort of darker sides of your personality, and you're also aware of the darker sides of other people's personality. And in fact, it might be a little bit of a shock when you actually start to think about it. When you start to think about why is someone doing what they're doing? What is their motivations? And you think about it, and that might be a surprise to you. And you might be tempted to reevaluate someone or groups of people in the light of what you're starting to feel. But I suspect that it is nothing to worry about, that you're just seeing people for what they are. And if you can sort of accept Black Moon Lilith moving into Libra, it is just going to make you better informed and better able to deal with the world. Okay, you could just pretend it doesn't exist and everything is fine, and it's all about, flowers and butterflies and no one hurting anyone and everything is fine and paradise and all that kind of stuff. But I suppose the world's not really like that, is it? And so just being aware of that just is certainly going to make your life richer, and at the same time you're going to have a better understanding of other people, and that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it? Really, really is important to understand people at all levels, including the darkest and basest levels. Scorpio, you are in a fairly expansive mood in some respects. You just know that there's more to life than there is just right in front of you, but you can go beyond the immediate bounds of your existence, and there is scope for exploration. And I think that being curious is certainly a good thing, and because you know a lot, you can feel a lot, but you don't get everything, you don't know everything, and now is a chance to really get to the bottom of things, and also to consider new experiences, because a new experience, it may seem like a new experience, but once you have a new experience, you'll perhaps realize that it's actually an old experience. It's like you have a new experience, but in the process of having this new experience, you're reminded of something from the past, and you're able to link back with the past. And of course, linking with the past is just so important, because the past is fundamentally who you are. So the new is the old, and so there's perhaps nothing you need to be afraid of there in terms of new experiences, because if something is new and original, you're just going to be looping back. And I think that is going to give you a great sense of integrity and overall, I suppose, self-awareness, and the fact that you and the past, it's all one. Now, as far as other people are concerned, Scorpios are all, they're always concerned about other people. Other people can be an issue. Other people can be a threat to your independence. They can be a threat to your peace of mind. And sometimes people can behave in a somewhat unstable and unpredictable way. Perhaps like today, because today we do have a square between Venus and Uranus. And this Venus-Uranus square may indicate that certain people are becoming unreliable, or are perhaps a law unto themselves, or maybe they're just so stubborn that they just can't see alternative perspectives, and that could really be a problem. So you kind of have to work out what's going on here. I think it's probably not a day when you should be reliant on other people, and you certainly shouldn't make assumptions about other people. You would like to make assumptions about other people. I think that's what Scorpios do. They assume that people are going to behave in a particular way, and when they don't behave as expected, then they get really disappointed. So I think that you have to be as flexible as possible, and in terms of your dealings with other people, just have a margin. Have a margin for other people's unreliability and misbehavior. So it's going to be annoying, but I don't think you should judge people on the way they behave, or unless they behave in a completely outrageous way. It's just that certain people may feel that they have to be unusually stubborn, and perhaps you should just accept the situation in the short term and just see how it develops. Yeah, someone might be stubborn and unreasonable today, but probably in a few days' time they will have calmed down, and they're going to be much less of a problem. And one reason why people might behave in a way that you find irritating is because they don't actually know how to behave, and they don't know what is expected of them. Because perhaps, Scorpio, you aren't actually giving any cues, or perhaps you haven't given cues in the past. If, on the other hand, Scorpio, which I think you can do today, if, on the other hand, you make it very clear what you expect, and you also try your hardest to be sociable and accepting, and at the same time strong. You're a strong person who is sociable, who is prepared to listen. Then if you give that impression, then I think things are going to be easier. People will have a greater respect for you, and if they want to change their mind or change their plans, they might be more open about it. And so with the right attitude, Scorpio, I think that you can really actually bring people together, even if their behavior is somewhat unusual, and it's perhaps just tolerating people's idiosyncrasies, and I understand it at times it may be like herding cats. Isn't that the phrase? That herding cats is apparently not an easy activity, and so just going with the flow and just being accepting that people are different and that people have their own ways of doing things. I just think that that's going to make the day a whole lot easier, and also it means there'll be fewer surprises. And, what you don't want is surprises. Scorpios don't like surprises. Yes, there are going to be surprises, but if you just tell yourself that there are going to be surprises, when the surprises do happen, you won't be surprised, and there won't be such a danger that you'll react in a negative way. Sagittarius, you are aware that you are living in a complicated world, and it's not the kind of awareness that you really want to dwell on, but just right now it's just not a particularly Sagittarian day. I would put it like that. It's a day when questions need to be asked. Questions always have to be asked, but today the questions, there are quite a lot of questions that need to be asked and need to be answered, and you need to give yourself the time and the space to work out what these questions actually are and how you need to respond to them. And if you're just surrounded by noise and by people and other distractions, you're just not going to be able to get anything done. So, Sagittarius, I think that you do need to withdraw up to a point. You need to withdraw into a space where you can sort of look at yourself and look at other people and ask important questions. And, the answers are within yourself, I think, in many cases. The answers are not out there. They are within yourself, and they are perhaps within your immediate experience. You look at what's been happening over the last couple of weeks, and you've got a memory of what's been happening over the last couple of weeks, and so you can actually think it through. And when you go through the records, those mental records that you've made, and you'll be able to start to piece things together, and soon enough it will be pretty clear about the way things are and the way things are going. And I also think, as I said yesterday, that it is a time, Sagittarius, when you need to make a special effort to understand, what the world is like, what is happening around you, and just not panicking when you see perhaps that the world is disintegrating. I mean, the world is disintegrating. We all know that, don't we? And it's just part of the human condition right now, where we are in 2024. And so you're aware of this disintegration, and as you're aware of this disintegration, you perhaps become, in a way, more comfortable, because you kind of know what's going on. I mean, that's what's really disturbing, isn't it? Just not knowing what's happening next, not knowing where things are going. But if you know that at some level things are getting worse, again, it's not about you. It's just about the world in which you live. If you just know that things are getting worse, it just makes it easier for you to just be comfortable and perhaps to respond to the situation. Because, you can't detach yourself from what is going on out there. And indeed, in some respects, if you want to understand, you really want to understand what's going on out there in the world in which you live, you actually have to, ironically, retreat from the world. So you retreat from the world and you start to get a perspective. I think the reason that is the case, Sagittarius, is that if you are not retreating from the world, if you are with a lot of other people and you've got a lot of social distractions, you're very much tied to the here and now. You're very much tied to other people's short-term concerns, and so you're getting a picture of a world that is quite limited and is just focused on short-term considerations. Yet when you withdraw from that, then you're in a position to see the whole world, not just a part of the world. You start to see the whole picture, and you see the whole picture, and you start to realize where things are going. And once you realize where things are going, you're in a better position to position yourself. And it's all about positioning yourself. I suppose that's what it's all about, isn't it? Dealing with a disintegrating society, a disintegrating world, is self-positioning. And you position yourself in the right way and in the right place, then you'll be fine. Whatever happens, people always survive. People always prosper, regardless of what's going on. And Sagittarius, there's no reason why you can't be one of the people who actually are able to prosper. Capricorn. I think Capricorn, it's going to be quite a satisfactory day. I think that you are relatively calm. You come over in the right way. You come over as a sort of fairly calming presence, and people are going to trust you. I think that they're going to be attracted to you, and there'll be something about you, actually, Capricorn, that is quite reassuring. So if people have got worries, you'll be able to put them at their ease, and you'll be able to create, I suppose, some kind of perspective. A lot of people are losing perspective at the moment, and they're perhaps just focusing on what's happening today, and they're worried about what's happening today, and they don't know what to do, and they lose their perspective. And so Capricorn, if you can just maintain your perspective, then people will really appreciate that. So do take advantage of that. And that does of course mean that I would have expected relationships to work pretty well, because people are just going to trust you, and you basically have what other people want. And I understand that Venus is making a square to Uranus, and I talked about Venus square Uranus quite a lot in this video, and I'm still going to talk about it a lot in this video. But with that Venus square Uranus, that can represent instability in relationships, because Venus is a planet of relationships, Uranus is a planet of, earthquakes and disruption. So with that Venus square Uranus, there could be a lot of disruption, but I don't think that's going to affect you. It's more going to affect other people. Other people are just going to be aware of the instability and disruption around them, and so perhaps they're going to, regard you as being a source of security. You're the place where everything is in the light rather than in the darkness, and you're not playing games. You're not hiding anything. Of course, when you actually look at what is going on, for example, at work, if you happen to be working today, or if you're happening to be engaging in any form of major social pursuit, or business, organizations, whatever, if you're doing anything like that, it will become apparent to you that a lot of the people you have to deal with, they are hiding. They are just hiding stuff, and they're being motivated by things that they don't really understand. Maybe it's their deeper emotions, it's collective insecurities. It's just something fairly dark, and you can see that how people are being motivated. But at the same time, you can see it, and I suppose if you shine light on the darkness, which I think you can do, then the demons flee, don't they? I mean, I suppose that's what happens, at dawn. And when the, as they say, when the cock crows, that's when the ghosts disappear, and there's something about you and your presence. And if you really focus on who you are, it's not about trying to be someone else. If you just keep focusing on who you are and what is real, then you'll be almost being something of an exorcist. I don't know if you probably regarded yourself as an exorcist, but I'm not talking about that literally, but I think, Capricorn, you can be an exorcist. You can help banish these sort of dark forces, dark spirits. And I'm assuming I'm talking about things which are metaphorical here. I'm not talking about anything real. Who knows about demons? But you are able to banish these things, and it's just about shining light on things. And people are afraid of things, and particularly particularly in terms of dealing with authority figures. When you're at work, when people are trying to take on authority, they get worried about these sort of almost demonic forces, and you can just create some light here. I think that is something you can do, and you can just make things a lot simpler for other people, and also you can make, I think, things a lot simpler for yourself. So that's certainly something you can do, and what we're looking for is understanding, and essentially you are a stabilizing force, and that is, I suppose, the key point about today, Capricorn. You are a stabilizing force wherever you are. Aquarius, you're perhaps feeling that you need to do something. I think you've had that feeling for some time, but now's just a good time to do it. Get it out of the way. I think that is actually going to be quite easy. It's a Friday, end of the week, so do consider whatever it is that just needs to be done, and just get it out of the way. It's easy. Maybe that's the first thing you should do. Now, aside from that, Aquarius, there is a square aspect between Venus and Uranus, and I think it might be an aspect that you do feel. And Venus does relate to other people. Venus is in Leo. Leo is your opposite sign, and so with Venus in Leo, you may feel that you're being perhaps undermined a little by other people's inflexibility. Remember, Venus is square Uranus, so people are stubborn, and people have their way of doing things, and people's stubbornness can actually be disruptive if you allow it to be significant. And so maybe there's a sense, Aquarius, in which it does matter how significant you make things. So if you're dealing with people who refuse to budge, who are just absolutely convinced about their own rightness, then it's easy to get annoyed. Because Aquarius, you in your own way are quite a stubborn person. You like to do things your way. Other people like to do things their way. And where is the scope for agreement or compromise or whatever? There is no scope for agreement or compromise. And, matters may not be helped by your own perceptions. You might look at another person's behavior and make some assumptions about it, but your assumptions could be entirely wrong. So perhaps, Aquarius, you just don't want to make people too significant. And if people refuse to budge, then just leave them be. And perhaps what you need to do is get on with your own life. You've got things you need to do. You've got particular time frames to consider, and so that's probably the best way of going about things. Though you mustn't, totally exclude other people. There are different people and different personalities, different approaches. Some people, I think, really are rather difficult, and you're not going to be able to change them. Other people have a different perspective. I think that the people that matter to you, the people who are really important, are actually very different. They are putting a high premium on togetherness. It might not seem obvious, but unity and togetherness are really important. Are really important at the moment, and you have to kind of work out, what people want. And it depends which people you're talking about. As I said, if we're talking about close relationships, partners, for example, whether they be romantic partners, life partners, business partners, try to find out what they want, and they are actually looking for a new level of understanding. And perhaps you will be misled by surface appearances. So in fact, just because someone is, one could say that just because someone is being unreasonable doesn't mean that they're looking for a war. In fact, they may actually be looking for an understanding. And so this gives rise to the question of, what kind of people are you talking about? Some people really are worth listening to, and they're looking for harmony, and other people are looking for disruption. And you have to, perhaps, Aquarius, distinguish between the two. And distinguishing between the two is not going to be easy, because today I think that there are going to be a lot of mixed messages, and that's possibly the problem. You are overwhelmed by mixed messages, and in a way, I am part of the mixed message. You're listening to me, giving you this forecast for August, Friday, August the 2nd, and it might feel that I am giving mixed messages, but I'm just part of the furniture. I'm part of the experience that you're having to deal with today. So somehow you have to deal with all the mixed messages, including perhaps the mixed messages coming from me, and you then have to make a special effort to untangle these messages, and I suppose just work out who all the people are around you, who they are, where they are, and ask yourself, what are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to confuse things? Are they trying to cause disruption? Or do they deep down want harmony? Because some people really want harmony. That's what everyone wants. It's what the people that matter want. And I think, Aquarius, actually, that's what you want right now. You're looking for harmony, and actually you don't want things to be complicated. And going back to what I said right at the beginning, there's just something you just want to do, and you want to do it in a peaceful, harmonious environment where, where there isn't really anything much to worry about. Finally, I should say something about your home environment. Home environment, I think if you're at home, it's very important that you're in control, and that it's also very clear about who is making the decisions. Because what could make things really complicated is sort of mixed decisions and mixed responsibilities. For example, a family member might be confused about what they're supposed to be doing, and there might be mixed messages. And especially if something is important, like it relates to sort of equipment, or I don't know, kettles, water heaters, washing machines, those kind of things. There might be a misunderstanding about it, and one person does one thing, one family member does one thing, another family member does another thing, and somehow that causes damage. That's the way it is with equipment, isn't it? So at home, everyone needs to be very clear about what their responsibilities are. And you mustn't assume that people know what to do. Even if they're close members of your family, don't make assumptions. And that way, I think that you'll be ensuring that there will be harmony. Remember, harmony can be disrupted at home in the most trivial ways. Harmony can be disrupted by, I don't know, a disagreement how to load a dishwasher, for example. Pisces. It's a day, Pisces, when you're pretty creative, I think. I think you have a good sense of what you can do. And Pisces, I think that you're going to just want to just do it in your own way, and I don't think that you need to be too concerned about disruptions. I think that you're very into yourself and what you can do, and at the same time, Pisces, you'll just benefit by a fundamental sense of your own timescale and discipline. You understand the constraints, and sure, it's nice to be creative, but you're going to be able to be creative within certain limits. You're not going to be crazily creative. You're actually going to be able to take something that you're good at, and you'll be able to structure it. And that means, it's a great day for making a creative product. So a creative product could be a painting, it could be a poem, it could be I don't know, something you're doing in the garden or the yard or whatever. Just an act of creativity which is real, which can be touched. You perhaps start the day, this creative thing is not there. You end the day, it actually is there. And that is because of your focus and the fact that you do regard it as being very important to be able to touch things. Tangibility really does matter, and so that is certainly a way in which the day can be very useful. Now, today also, for many people, is quite disruptive, because we've got Venus square Uranus. But I don't think that this Venus square Uranus is going to be disruptive, particularly for you. Okay, Venus square Uranus does affect everyone, regardless of their sign. So, and it does affect you to an extent, but it doesn't really affect you particularly. I think other signs are going to be more affected by Venus square Uranus. But perhaps from your perspective, you just have to make sure that you don't overreact to what you hear and to what other people say. You could hear things, facts, news stories, maybe global news stories or personal news stories, people talking about what's going on in their lives. And you listen to it all and it just might seem really dramatic. And you might want to stop what you're doing, or you might want to show great sympathy for another person because of what they say. But there's a slight danger of exaggeration. It's all a bit melodramatic. And so perhaps, Pisces, you need to get things in perspective. Things may not be as dramatic as they seem. And once you get a perspective, you'll perhaps see that people are exaggerating or people are overreacting. And that might mean, Pisces, that you may actually be in a position to calm people down and, put people into perspective. You might be able to say to someone, "Oh yeah, okay, this is not easy. It's not great, but look at the big picture." Do tell people to look at the big picture, Pisces, because I think you, Pisces, you're always very good at looking at the big picture because you are comfortable with the ocean, being able to see the interconnectedness of the seas and the oceans and the emotional oceans, and you can see. But if it is a storm in a teacup, which in many cases it is going to be a storm in a teacup, you'll be able to tell someone that they're exaggerating. So don't allow your own routines to be disrupted by someone else's panic, because that panic, may not be as serious as it sounds. Of course, it may be genuine panic, and I suppose you have to use your judgment on that. But by and large, I think it's a day for not exaggerating. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was hexagram number 40, which is deliverance. So this hexagram doesn't move. There are no moving lines. So deliverance is about being in a difficult situation and finding deliverance. The I Ching talks about a knot, this really tight knot, and that's represents the situation we're in. And it seems that we can loose this knot, we can untie the knot, and that gets us out of the bad situation. So now might be a time to get out of this situation, but we may just have a chance here. We're perhaps in a difficult situation. Maybe we've made a promise, or maybe it relates to another person who's creating problems for us. That could be the case. Or I suppose it could be a technological problem. But we have a chance to get out. But that chance may not last forever. So, there are a number of ways in which this could be working out. Deliverance could be, I don't know, buying a product on Amazon. We have this product, we've spent money on it, we don't know what to do with it. We kind of think that it may just be a waste of money, but we just do nothing with the product, and then in the end we have to pay for it because we haven't sent it back. Deliverance might be just that simple, just sending something back because it's not working. We spent too much money on it. It doesn't suit our needs. Deliverance could be like we've made a promise to someone, and we're just realizing we don't actually want to keep this promise because this promise could go in all sorts of different areas, and we don't want to get involved. Or deliverance, maybe we've signed a contract for something, or we're about to sign a contract, and this contract is expensive and it's not doing us any good, and we need to get out of it. So think about it. What are you signed up to? What are you involved with? Something you just don't want to, you just feel uncomfortable with it. It's just becoming a real nightmare, or it could become a nightmare. Well, today you can get free of it, and I think that is I think that's really useful and that's really helpful. And we get an idea about what deliverance is about by looking at the nuclear hexagram, which is the hexagram underneath deliverance. This isn't deliverance itself. It's not about what's going to happen today or anything. It just gives an underlying idea about it. And so the underlying hexagram, the nuclear hexagram, is hexagram 63, which is after completion. And after completion is a situation where things are in place. We've sort of crossed the river, but that's the symbolic way that the I Ching likes to look at things. We've made the crossing, but what now? And things are starting. Things are very slowly starting to go wrong with after completion. This is the peak. We've done it, but now the disintegrating forces are starting to move into the ascendancy, and so this goes back to hexagram 40, deliverance. We can see that things are starting to go wrong, and we can see ourselves moving into a situation that we basically don't want to be in. And this situation could be completely trivial, like I said, with getting something from Amazon we decide we don't want. It could be seriously important, about making a major financial commitment that we realize is going to destroy us. That's another way in which deliverance can operate. But whatever it is, whether it's really majorly important or trivial, we have a chance to get out of it. And if we don't take that chance very soon, we might miss the opportunity. And so really, I think the deliverance hexagram, its message is very simple, so I don't think I need to really dwell any further on it. Okay, so now I just want to look at today's astrology in greater detail. I also want to consider Warren Harding, because Warren Harding did die 101 years ago, on October the 2nd, 1923. And okay, since then we've had the other president who's died in office has been obviously Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He died in 1945, and Warren Harding was quite young, and here is his chart. I know I've already looked at his chart, but I just thought I want to just look at the death of Warren Harding again, because he's a president who, he was the president who started the Roaring Twenties. All started in the 20s. It started then. He was a Republican. He is seen by many as being one of the worst presidents ever because of the teapot dome scandal about oil companies leasing government lands cheaply, and there being a lot of corruption taking place. Which, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it necessarily affected Warren Harding. I don't think Warren Harding himself was quite as corrupt as some people make out. But so looking at Warren Harding's chart, here is Warren Harding. So there are some interesting things about Warren Harding. So Warren Harding was a Scorpio, born on November the 2nd, 1865. I think we have a time for him. I think he's 2:30 p.m. and he's from Ohio. And so there is his sun at 10 Scorpio, born just before a new moon. And his moon was at 3 Taurus. It's kind of interesting, his moon at 3 Taurus, because he reminds me of someone else, another Scorpio, who had his moon in very, very early Scorpio. Sorry, very, very early Taurus. And that is, of course, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, like Warren Harding, was a Scorpio. And you can see that Joe Biden has his moon at 0 degrees Scorpio. So 0 degrees 29... Sorry, moon at 0 degrees 29 Taurus. So there's a kind of a link up between Joe Biden and Warren Harding. Both were Scorpio, both were moon in Taurus. I don't know. I mean, if Biden really, as I've said before, if Biden wanted to do Kamala Harris a favour, he would do a Warren Harding. I mean, okay, he might die. That would be doing Kamala Harris a favour, I think. Or he might just resign from the presidency. I really think that would help Kamala Harris's chances. And I mean, I suppose perhaps that's why I'm talking about Warren Harding today. You know, I think this is just a reminder that this was a time when the president died, and if Joe Biden was to disappear, and if Kamala Harris was to, for whatever reason, I think it would be pretty good for Kamala Harris, I think, because she would now become the incumbent, and I think incumbency is really important. But you know, it's 101 years ago. I think that medical care is much better now than it was 101 years ago. Even though Biden was substantially older than what Warren Harding was when he died. So with Warren Harding, I mean, that's Warren Harding's inauguration. So as far as Warren Harding's death is concerned, again, I've looked at the death chart before, but this is what was happening when he died. So Warren Harding died on August the 2nd. He was born on November the 2nd. So when you've got second, that suggests that the suns are going to be in aspect. So here is Warren Harding's sun was at 10:27 Scorpio, and the sun was at 9:47 Leo. So the sun was square Warren Harding's. He had sun square sun aspect when he died, and it's more than that. But we had sun square Jupiter. So sun was square Jupiter. Sun square Jupiter. You can see. There you go. Jupiter was exactly on his sun, and so I think that that's a release. You know, and he was young. I mean, he was he wasn't when he died. He was 35. I mean, he wasn't. What was he? About 57 when he died. So he was not old when he died. So Jupiter was conjunct his sun. Sun was square his sun. Sorry, yeah, sun was. So we had a Sun-Jupiter square, and you could say that in many respects is what killed him. It's interesting also to look at the role of Black Moon Lilith. So Warren Harding had Black Moon Lilith opposition the moon. And, I'm wondering if that says something about him as having this reputation for being a corrupt president. I don't think he was as corrupt as some people make him out to be. But so there is Moon in Taurus, quite sort of. That's a very nice. That is a wonderful Moon in Taurus, at the degree of its exaltation. That just puts Warren Harding in a very strong position, and the Moon is often actually connected. Traditionally, it is connected with communication, and actually connected with writing. I think that's what Gauguin's son, and of course he made his name as a journalist, as buying newspapers. He was a newspaper man, and he was very effective at collecting newspapers, and on a shoestring he was able to do wheeling and dealing and building up a newspaper empire. And I think he was the first journalist, or even the only journalist, who has got to the White House. And so he had Moon opposition Black Moon Lilith in his chart, and that maybe perhaps reflects some of his choices. Moon opposition, he's got Saturn conjunct Black Moon Lilith. So there is his Moon, perhaps him trying to do the right thing, but he just gets involved with things. Saturn conjunct Black Moon Lilith, that represents the corruption and the darkness that he just got involved with as a president, and whatever his other members of his cabinet were doing. So perhaps he wasn't personally responsible for the Teapot Dome scandal, but he just got dragged into it. And it's kind of interesting that when he died, Black Moon Lilith was at 6 Taurus. So Black Moon Lilith had just transiting. True Black Moon Lilith had just crossed his moon, and the transiting South Node was on his ascendant. Now, this raises the question about his inauguration. So you'd have expected the inauguration of Warren Harding to sort of show some of this stuff up. So this is Warren Harding's inauguration, which I think was certainly on March the 4th, 1921. I think because in those days presidents got inaugurated on March the 4th, and so not on January the 20th. So I've gone for noon. I think that's when presidents become presidents. Just notice that he has Uranus exactly on the midheaven at the time of his inauguration. So when he died, that must have been a bit of a shock for the person who took over from him, who was Calvin Coolidge. So here is Calvin Coolidge's chart. I don't have his time of birth. So Calvin Coolidge, it's interesting, if you're born on July the 4th, Calvin Coolidge, great day for a president to be born on July the 4th, because you just have a sympathy with your country. Just, George Bush Jr., I never quite understood how George Bush Jr. got elected to be president of the US, but he was born on July the 6th. So if you're born July the 4th or around July the 4th, it gives you a special affinity with the country, doesn't it? So there's Calvin Coolidge's chart. And with Calvin Coolidge, it might be a good idea to look at Calvin Coolidge's solar return just before he became president. And he was a really non-interfering president. He didn't like to get involved in anything. He just let things just go their way. He was a very hands-off president, and certainly that seemed to work in the short term, because I suppose he was president during the Roaring Twenties. And so you have there's his solar return, and this is going to be very close to America's solar return, because remember, America was born on July the 4th. So on his solar return, Sun square Saturn, Moon square the Sun. So you think, when you're dealing with solar returns, you think that, that's a really bad aspect, Sun square Saturn. But you kind of feel what it must have been like for him when his boss died. It must have been quite traumatic. He suddenly becomes president. He never had any plans to become president. And Sun square Saturn in his solar return chart with the moon, we don't know exactly where the moon is because we don't have his time of birth, but the moon opposition Saturn there. And So that's Calvin Coolidge's chart. There's Black Moon Lilith at 1 Taurus. I don't know whether it's relevant that that's on Warren Harding's moon. But then there is the USA's solar return. So this is the USA's solar return for July the 6th, 1923. And I think that, does this chart indicate the death of a president? Well, I think it might well do, the death of a leader. Well, it's you've got Mars rising, you've got the Sun square Saturn. So there's Sun square Saturn. So the Sun represents the leader, and the Mars is on the ascendant. So that, I suppose that could represent war, but you've got the Moon sort of opposition Saturn. So I would have said that is quite a difficult time for the United States. And looking at the USA's chart itself, and what was going on for the USA at the time of the death of its president, it was a Saturn return. The United States had its Saturn return in 1923. So the United States' Saturn was at 1448, and Warren Harding died with the Saturn at 1508 Libra. So there was a Saturn return, and I think that is really, really descriptive. Saturn represents the government, the leader, and there was also a Chiron return. So there's Chiron, and there was a Moon-Chiron conjunction when Warren Harding died. So that's Warren Harding. I thought I'd talk about Warren Harding as it's the 101st anniversary. In a way, he's a president we don't know much about, but I think it's interesting, and I hope you found that interesting. Now, August the 2nd is also about today, isn't it? And today is well, in terms of what we have got. Well, let's have a look at the Venus-Uranus square. So we have this Venus-Uranus square. You just reminder about the chart for today. There's Venus, and it's square Uranus, and today, and Uranus is conjunct Algol. So how do we see Venus? I don't think we need to see Venus necessarily as being about the planet of love or the planet of relationships or the planet of money or style or whatever. We could just see Venus as being a trigger for some kind of event, for better or for worse. And this trigger does mean that Uranus could have an impact on certain people, like Joe Biden, for example. Joe Biden has his sun at 27 Taurus. So that means that Uranus is moving towards the opposition of Joe Biden's sun. And then we've got Venus being the trigger. So that Venus square Joe Biden's sun today is going to be of the nature of Uranus. It's going to emphasize the fact that he's got Uranus opposition his sun. So I don't know, there may be things going on in Joe Biden's life. I suppose you could say, well, Uranus is in his 6th house, perhaps connected with health. Venus is relatively close to his Chiron. So I'm just thinking that Venus might be a difficult day, and I'm not going to say that Joe Biden's going to resign. I mean, but I suppose I would say that if Joe Biden was going to stand down from a presidency, and I said I'm sure he won't stand down from a presidency. He's got his legacy to worry about. Joe Biden is not going to want to vacate the White House, even if it's going to improve Kamala Harris's chances of getting elected. And also, Jill Biden is absolutely not going to want, she's going to want to hang on to the White House for as absolute long as possible. But if there's any day that for where I'd think, oh, Joe Biden could resign, Joe Biden could step down or something happen, it would be today. And it's not just because of this, it's also because there's just that symbolic thing, but it's the anniversary of Warren Harding's death, 101st anniversary of Warren Harding's death. But it's not going to happen. But I just thought I would just point out these connections here with that date 101 years ago, and also the fact that I do think Joe Biden is going to be under a lot of pressure. So probably if you see that Joe Biden is still president, he's alive and well next week, then I think that's Kamala Harris's opportunity. Maybe that's her window of opportunity gone. Because I do think it matters in terms of Kamala Harris getting re-elected. I think she really needs to be the president to have a real chance of getting elected. I'm not just saying that from a perspective of astrology. It just feels that way. But Joe Biden, let's be fair, Joe Biden is not the only person being impacted by this Venus square Uranus. The Republican ticket is seriously affected by it, because here's J.D. Vance's chart. So J.D. Vance has, you can see J.D. Vance has got Venus on his ascendant, which is nice, but Uranus is square his ascendant. So with Uranus square his ascendant, Venus on his ascendant, he's getting a Uranus on the ascendant experience today, and perhaps over the weekend as well. So I don't know what J.D. Vance is up to. I don't know how he may get more criticism. He's always getting criticism. The Democrats are really out to get J.D. Vance, aren't they, at the moment? So I suppose J.D. Vance has to look after himself, and his perhaps potential future boss, Donald. If we look at Donald Trump's chart, we've kind of got the same thing, haven't we? Because we have got Venus is conjunct Donald Trump's Mars, which is actually quite nice, because it brings it potentially quite nice, because Venus conjunct Mars is a good aspect. But remember, he's got Uranus square his Mars. It was Uranus square his Mars that was linked to the assassination attempt a few weeks ago. But now Venus conjunct his Mars, it's kind of triggering it. So I think that Trump, like J.D. Vance, could really be impacted by this, and I think that. I think we'll have to see how it goes today and perhaps over the weekend, and see if there are any changes here. I know the Democrats are really trying to push Donald Trump into sacking J.D. Vance and finding some other candidate. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to fall for that bet. I think the Democrats at some level are actually afraid of J.D. Vance. I think that's why they're going for him so much. And as I said, J.D. Vance's Vedic chart looks really good for the election. So those are a few people impacted by it. Now, something else to mention is the Paris Olympics. So with the Paris Olympics, we have got France, and there is France's. If we look at France's natal chart, the storming, when the Bastille fell, that's a chart for July the 14th, 1789. I've gone to 5:30 p.m. and so if you look at the planet return for when this is when when France has its Mars return. So Mars returns to its natal position, France, today, August the 2nd. So that's another reason why today is important, because France is having its Mars return, and the Mars return is important. I mean, look at we've looked at this chart before. I mean, sorry if I'm going over charts that I've already looked at before, but I thought it all comes together today. And here's a Notre Dame fire on April the 15th, 2019. Mars was at 10 Gemini. So that was a couple of degrees on. So this whole area which we're in terms of France and the Olympics and disasters, we've already had the fires on the train system, and so today, Friday, is a peak when the Bastille chart has its Mars return. But over the next couple of days, arson, looting, fires, accidents, we all have to think about that in terms of France, and I suppose to an extent we have to think about that also in terms of the Olympics. And one point, by the way, I did want to make about the Olympics was about this picture. I looked at all this stuff about the Last Supper. The Neptune square the ascendant, and they had this sort of Last Supper like event, and which seemed to be the Last Supper. And that seems to be Neptune square the ascendant. All this confusion and people jumping to conclusions. And I'll be absolutely honest, I would have loved it to have been, and in a way, in my perverse way, I would have loved it to have really been a genuine parody of the Last Supper. Anything to get the Olympics a bad reputation. I'm sorry, I'm just revealing my own darkness, my own unpleasantness here. Yeah, that would have been great, but we have to be honest. To be honest, if you actually look at French art in the 19th century, there was a common image of the gods on Olympus, enjoying themselves and having this party with a table. And even in those paintings, you can see Jupiter with a halo on his head. And having looked at those paintings, it's actually absolutely clear that it was not an imitation of the Last Supper. And I hate to say that, but have to be honest about it. But still, the organisers of the Olympics, it was all a big confusion, and perhaps that is Neptune square the ascendant. And I suppose it may just also reflected cultural arrogance, perhaps on the French part. They were into their high art, into their art, and they, perhaps ordinary people weren't aware of the full scope of French art, and they weren't aware of these paintings of the, 18th, 19th century, which showed the gods enjoying themselves on Olympus. And when you look at those pictures, it's absolutely obvious that it wasn't the Last Supper, as far as I can see. But still, Neptune square the ascendant did sort of create that kind of confusion. Now, finally, and I'm going to continuing sort of on the theme of France, is that today, true Black Moon Lilith does go into Libra, and it's on the Aries point, and you can actually create this is the precise moment that Black Moon Lilith goes into Aries. Sorry, goes into Libra. This is the exact moment. And I've set this for New York. But you can see that Black Moon Lilith is right opposition Neptune. And so that does make it a somewhat difficult day, doesn't it? Or not just a day, but maybe this whole time we're living in it. Black Moon Lilith is on the Aries point right now. It's very, very Neptunian right now. And we are dealing with the creatures of the night. We don't quite know why and how people are motivated. And I think one politician who may be very much impacted by this a Black Moon Lilith opposition Neptune may be the French president Emmanuel Macron, because Emmanuel Macron, in his chart, he has there is Sun Mercury conjunction at 29 something Sagittarius, and so he's already got Neptune square his Sun and Venus. We've already seen this with Macron making some very strange decisions, like his decision to have new elections for the legislature, and earlier his obsession with Ukraine and saying stuff about French troops potentially being sent to the Ukraine. It's just clearly there's something going on with Macron, and I think that at the moment with Black Moon Lilith, so Black Moon Lilith is square right now. It's square his Mercury Venus conjunction, which is very close to the 0 degrees Capricorn solstice point. So I'm sure, or I think, that there is all sorts of stuff going on in Macron's life at the moment. I have no idea what he's thinking. And just remember that Macron has a semi-square in his chart between Uranus and the Sun Venus, the Sun Mercury conjunction. So he's not a particularly stable person at the best of times, and with Neptune and now with Black Moon Lilith hitting all this, who knows what he can do, and who knows kind of what experiences he's going to attract. I mean, this is Emmanuel Macron, the French head of state. The land is a king and the king is a land, so in some respects this represents what's happening in France. And and it's at a time when we've got France having its Mars return, so things could be interesting in France. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say in terms of me looking at August the 2nd and why I think August the 2nd today, there is a lot happening. If we look at Black Moon Lilith, and we look at we've also got the anniversary of the death of Warren Harding, and so I hope you found all that of some interest. Now, if you did find this video interesting, I would be very grateful if you were to like it, just pressing the like button. If you're not subscribed, I would be really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.